Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Contract Revolution. This is your host, Benji. Does mass hiring work? It's an interesting question, right? When it comes to team building, the way I see it, there are two competing philosophies. One is slow, deliberate, measured, like you're really looking for the perfect person. And then the other, to put it bluntly, is throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Now, spending a ton of time with candidates, probing into skills, abilities, values, personality, doing multiple interviews over the span of weeks or months, this is a great strategy for managers, leaders, and your core team. But what about higher turnover roles? Or what about seasonal businesses, right? Investing dozens of hours into hiring positions in your business that just naturally have a shorter shelf life doesn't make as much sense. But you also don't want to just chuck randos out on your job sites and get them in front of customers either. So it's a really fine balance. Today on the podcast, we're doing a system deep dive on a mass hiring and onboarding engine with Logan Campbell, one of our Breakthrough Academy members and the owner of the Dream Clean team in Florida. Now, the nature of his business, which primarily does Airbnb cleaning, requires a huge number of people doing work in a very, very short window. He employs over 100 cleaning professionals, for Pete's sake. So through intelligent design and automation, he has figured out what I think is an ingenious system to hire in bulk while ensuring he still separates the wheat from the chaff. So if you've ever wondered if mass hiring can work for your business, Logan's going to break it down for you. Let's dive in.
You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting.
Logan Campbell, welcome to Contractor Evolution, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Benji. Glad to be here.
So you have kind of a unique business, and I think that it's worth setting the stage for our listeners by having you talk a little bit about the work you guys do and then some of the unique features of it that's made for this situation where kind of a mass hiring approach, a mass onboarding approach is really needed. So why don't you tell us a bit about your company?
Yeah, so we operate an Airbnb cleaning operation out of Northwest Florida. So we're in the Florida Panhandle. And Airbnb cleaning, if you've ever stayed at an Airbnb, it's similar to a hotel. You check out at 10 a.m. and then a brand new guest will check in at 4 p.m. So we have around a 6-hour window to turn all of our properties. And so that's the cleaning, that's the laundry, that's everything. And right now we manage almost 300 of those property turns, and around 200 of those are going to be on one day out of the week. So typically that's going to be a Saturday. We may turn up to 200 properties in a 6-hour window. So in order to do that, it requires a lot more manpower. So, typically one cleaning pro, which is what we call our technicians, they can handle up to about 2 properties a day if they're not too big. So we need, roughly 100 people to turn those properties just one day out of the week. So we're operating at a much higher level as far as what our scale actually is compared to hiring. We need much more staff than a typical, home service business there.
So there is a massive amount of activity, this huge flurry of work that happens in a very, very short window. And as a result, like in other words, this probably seems obvious, but it's worth explaining. It's not like you can kind of like spread it out a little bit more and do it with fewer people. It all needs to happen at once. And that's put a really unique pressure on your business compared to others where you need a lot of bodies to get this done. Is that apt to say?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have guys that are coming in. This may be the only vacation of the entire year. They may be coming in from Spain and they have nowhere else to go. So if these properties aren't done, we can't push it to the next day. And so typically it's all going to get done on one day, which, that demand for people is a lot higher.
So, okay. This is important. What are the other, like in the BTA universe, when you're working with other members or talking to other industries or at a Breakthrough Academy event, do you have a sense for what other types of businesses can really benefit or learn from this approach to hiring that we're going to walk through in a second?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be most applicable to those that are in home services that have either a high turnover or a lot of seasonality. So it could be Christmas light installation, it could be lawn care, anyone that needs to ramp up or ramp down because of the seasonality or just turnover is going to benefit from that for sure.
Yeah. So hear that, folks. If you have a very seasonal business in the sense that like 70% of your revenue or 80% of your revenue gets done in a 4 or 6 month window, if you have a lot of high turnover roles, this mass hiring engine that Logan is going to break down for us is going to make a lot of sense for you. And I think even if you don't duplicate the system, there's going to be elements of it that you can recreate and make fit in your own context. Okay, so tell me about, but before you figured this out, tell me about kind of the pain points, the struggle. Like what was going on in your business before you had this onboarding system that we're going to talk about?
Yeah, good question, Benji. So before we got into this system, we used to hold interviews because we were at that pain point where we needed to grow, but we didn't have enough people to grow. So we're stuck at that middle ground where we kept getting pulled back into the business because we didn't have enough people to complete the work. And so what we would end up doing is we would sit in a coffee shop from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and we'd have 15-minute slots for interviews, and we'd fill it up with people from Indeed for one-on-one interviews. And the challenge is majority of those guys didn't show up to an interview. And so whenever that happened, there wasn't enough time between the canceled interview or the no-show and the next scheduled interview to get anything meaningful done. So we may waste 7 hours 3 days a week and really not get a whole lot done. And so that was a huge pain point for us where we just wasted so much time that really we weren't able to work on the business because we were spending so much time trying to get enough people to actually help us complete the work. And it wasn't enough time.
How many hours or days did you sit in Starbucks like an idiot with nobody at the other side of the table?
It was rough. I mean, it was usually 3 to 4 days a week, but luckily I went to a local coffee shop instead of a Starbucks just to kind of negate some of that. But
it's less busy, less people to see this. I mean, obviously there's a huge human capital requirement for your business. Like, were you guys having to go on site and get some of these cleans done, get some of these turnarounds done from time to time?
Oh yeah, 100%. So we would I'll never forget my wife. There was a situation where we had a client call us and they're like, hey, we want to give you these new properties. It's like, I think it was like 18 properties, something like that. And, but the only problem is they're all scheduled for their first cleans on Saturday. Can you pick them up? And that was like 2 days away. And I picked up the phone, called my wife, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to post this Indeed posting. I want you to call everyone that applies and see if we can get this fixed. So we ended up doing that, and we're trying to make sure that we have enough people to complete this new work we have coming in. And we ended up getting like 22 people to apply, which was awesome, like in 24 hours. So I had a whole list. My wife calls them, and she comes out of the room. She's like, good news, babe. High fives me. She's like, 7 of them are going to be here Saturday. We're good to go. And we're all fired up. Well, Saturday comes around and we're getting ready to start the work. And out of those 7 people, 1 person shows up. And so we immediately have to jump into the field and actually, complete a lot of the work to get it done. So it was a huge pain point there.
Okay, I want to get into this system. Before we do, let's talk about wardrobe. Ladies and gentlemen, my outfit today is brought to you by Landscape Solutions of Nashville, Tennessee. Great city. Owned by Cliff Jones. High-end residential landscape design and construction. They've been in Breakthrough Academy for 4 years. In that time, they've grown their revenue by over $2 million. And the team has grown from 12 to 23. I asked Cliff, what's the biggest thing that Breakthrough Academy has helped you with? He said, mindset. I don't have to do everything, and I've learned to delegate and trust in my team. Cliff, thanks for the outfit. If you are listening and you're interested in checking out, learning about Breakthrough Academy, there's going to be a link in the description below this video or on the podcast app. We systemize contracting businesses for growth. And if you're wanting to expedite that process, implement systems like the one Logan's about to share with us, check us out. Okay, let's talk about this system. I'm just going to hand you the mic here and you kind of walk me through the design and the implementation of it, starting at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing for us is we weren't getting enough applicants. And so it's very similar to when we're trying to sell customers. We needed more leads, we needed more people, and we needed to target the ideal candidates. And so the very first thing that we did is we ended up optimizing our copy so that we spoke to our ideal candidate. A lot of people shy away, or at least what we've noticed is we were shying away from like wanting to nail down one specific type of person that would be great for this role. But we ended up embracing that instead. So for us, it's stay-at-home moms, or it's teachers, or it's past athletes, or someone that's currently in school that needs extra income on the weekends. So we started optimizing our copy so that way whenever we were actually had our job listing, we were calling those guys out. That was one of the big things that we did that made a shift where people that were reading that were either like, hey, that's me, or I resonate with that, I should probably apply. The second thing we did is we wanted to go ahead and make sure that we were magnifying our reach. And the way we did that is very similar to if you're trying to get a new customer, we started sponsoring jobs on Indeed. So the job copy that we had optimized on Indeed, we started sponsoring that and putting a budget on it to get it in front of more people. And then also asked our existing network to refer us out. So that would be our cleaning pros, our all of our current staff. We'd ask them to share that job posting as well, just to get that in front of more people. Now, the problem that we noticed when we first started doing that is we started getting a lot of people, which were great, but they were still a bunch of tire kickers. They were still a bunch of people that maybe were not the best fit for the role. And so we needed a way to prevent it from being super easy to apply. So just like when you're trying to get a new customer, you don't want it to be super easy for them to book if they're not very serious. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we stopped allowing them to apply on Indeed. We shut that feature down because they used to have like the text to apply or like the mass apply. And we would get people just applying just to fulfill a certain requirement.
These are features. Sorry to interrupt. These are features that Indeed has kind of baked into the platform that they like because they're for the most part their end user is the job seeker, the business owner as well, but they've kind of done that like easy to apply approach because people like it. But you were finding, hey, this actually is like quite problematic for what we're trying to do. Am I getting that right?
Oh yeah, Indeed loves it, which is great, but like I actually wanted the opposite. I didn't want it to be super easy. So for them, they want to see the metrics and how many applicants are getting to us, which is great. But instead, what we did is we developed a hiring page and then we pushed them to that hiring page. So instead of saying, hey, text to apply, it's super easy to apply, we ended up forcing them to apply on a dedicated hiring page.
So they link off of Indeed, and then now they're on a new page, which is attached to your website or Unbalanced or something. It's just like one extra step to reduce some of the volume of applicants, the crappy applicants. At least that's the idea.
Exactly. It's just that extra little bit of friction where it's not asking too much, but maybe it weeds out those guys that aren't willing to take that extra step.
Gotcha.
And once they get there, now the landing page or the hiring page is going to be dedicated to that job. So we're talking about our mission. We're talking about our core values. We have videos, walkthroughs. It's basically selling our brand. It's very similar if you were to go to a landing page, if you're trying to sell a customer. You want to sell the features. You want to sell the benefits. You want to sell who this is good for. And that's what we ended up doing. And on that page is going to have our actual application that they would go through.
What is the actual application? Is it a simple form? Is it a test? Like what are you having them complete to say, hey, I want this job?
Yeah. So if they read through it, we encourage them that, hey, if this resonates with you, like go ahead, push the apply button and apply. And so once they do apply, it's just a simple form similar to a type form or jot form. And what it'll have is basic application questions. And then there's a couple of deal breakers in there. So we've identified a few things that are important to us that if you are not able to complete or acquire, that you're really not going to be a good job fit for us. And for us, it could be a smartphone and maybe a certain type of availability. For example, Saturdays, which is when we're turning majority of our properties. If they fill out that application and they don't meet those minimum requirements, they're immediately disqualified. Mm-hmm. If they do meet those requirements, they're immediately sent to a page where it has them fill out an interview or a time to schedule an interview.
Hey everyone, finding the right people is the hardest part about growing a contracting business. So here's a little freebie from us that we think will help. Download our ideal candidate profile and job posting tool to help you figure out what profile of person you actually need in terms of their strengths, their experience, their personality, and then use that information to build sexier job postings that people actually apply to. Click the link in the description, implement it right away, build your dream team. Do you have any thoughts around this idea of like the right amount of friction when it comes to these systems? Like this, I don't think, by the way, that there's a right answer. I'm just wondering what your philosophy is on it. Some people are like incredibly tight and they only want to like sit down and do interviews or move people to the next step who, even at an early stage, they're very confident in someone who's going to be a good fit. And then there's other people who are a little bit looser and they just want a high volume. Like, what is your approach to figuring out that right balance of friction?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely is some tinkering. So for example, before we did this, there was no friction and we found out that was not going to work at all. And then we started putting in a little bit of friction. So I think we like putting a little bit of friction up front. And then if you're qualified, we want you in front of us. So we're not going to put in a whole lot more friction after that until we decide to make the decision to hire you. And then we have some friction on the back end. So that way, as you onboard, we may offer multiple people, but we only want those guys that are willing to go through that friction to actually work with us.
Going back to something you said earlier, do you find that the sponsored ad on Indeed is sort of, is there ROI there? Is it worth the spend? Do you notice a big uptick in terms of volume and applicants?
Yeah, so we sponsor every job, and there's really two approaches. There is a minimum and then a recommended. So if you're in a season where it's like, hey, I'm a Christmas light installer, and maybe it's August or September, and I'm trying to ramp it up for my team, you want to do the recommended amount. So the recommended budget that Indeed recommends. It doesn't matter if it's daily or monthly, but if you do their recommended, it'll drastically increase the number of applicants that you get.
Okay.
Now, if you're on a shoulder season where you're like, hey, I want my pipeline full, but I'm not necessarily like needing a bunch of people right now, that's when you do the minimum. But we always sponsor our job.
That would function largely, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that would function much like a pay-per-click thing where it is a bit of an auction. Like if it's a busy season and there's other Christmas light businesses who are trying to get people, the price is going to be, it's not a fixed rate. In other words, it kind of floats and moves depending on the demand forces for that specific applicant type. And you may be paying a lot, you may be paying a little. Is that correct?
Their recommended amount, yes.
Fluctuates.
So the recommended amount they give you, it'll be floating.
Yeah.
But you can set like a minimum or a maximum. Right. So for us, sometimes if for a shoulder season, I may just say, hey, I want to spend no more than $150 this month, and they won't go over that.
In your busy season, when you guys are ramping up, do you track like how many applicants a week or a month you're getting? Is there anything you can share?
Yeah. So we have a dashboard where basically all the applicants, anytime that they apply, they go into our online dashboard, and then we could see how many people applied, how many applied that were qualified, how many applied that were unqualified, how many interviews we scheduled, how many no-shows that we have. So all that's tracked into our system.
And how many people are you guys getting? Do you know?
I could pull those numbers up, but I mean, it's definitely been,
get back to me.
Yeah. We have almost 7,000 people in our database right now that have applied for the cleaning pro position just over the last 3 years.
Okay, that's helped. 7,000 3 years. That's a lot of volume. Okay. So here, let's keep moving down the funnel because this is really interesting. When somebody clicks to apply, they, based on the form, are quote unquote qualified. This is where things get very atypical. And I think that there's quite an ingenious sort of like thoughtfulness or design to how you do this. In your system, people go to like group interviews, or I think you call them rolling one-on-ones. This is not what most business owners do, and it's really interesting. So maybe just take us through that section.
Yeah. So rolling one-to-ones, it was really to solve that issue with the coffee that we talked about when I was at the coffee shop and we were just 9 to 4, 7 days or 7 hours a day. And we ended up coming up with what's called rolling one-to-ones. And the way that it works is, say someone applies and they're qualified and they schedule an interview, up to 30 people can schedule for the same exact interview slot. Now, that's for us. If you don't have quite that hiring need, maybe you want it to be 20 or maybe 15. But the idea is those guys are going to schedule, and we typically do that 4 slots a week. So Tuesdays, that's going to be 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. And then Thursdays, it'll be the same, 10 a.m., 12 p.m. So up to 30 people are able to schedule that interview slot. And basically when they come in, it's just first come, first serve. So they'll come in, they will sign in. And once they sign in, it notifies our hiring manager that, hey, so-and-so has showed up to their interview. You can start your interviews. Now, she'll pull that person aside to her office. They'll have the interview, and then whoever else comes in behind them will sign in as well. They'll grab a hiring binder, and then they'll read about that job while they wait for their interview. So it's going to...
Let me ask this. This is important. So there's 2 blocks. It's did you say 12 to 2?
10 a.m. and 12 p.m. So it's two blocks, but 10 and 12 are the 2 blocks.
So from 10 a.m. to 12 and then from 12 to noon. When the applicant is selecting that time, when you say up to 30 people can select it, is it like, hey, applicant, show up anytime between 12 and 2? Or are there like little smaller windows, like 15-minute blocks or 30-minute blocks within that 2-hour tranche?
It's only 10 to 10:15 and 12 to 12:15.
Got it. Okay. So it's literally a very, very short window that you shoot as many as 30 people to, and then they're all collected there. And obviously you can't interview 30 people at once. So how do you kind of manage if let's say it's a busy season and you got lucky on this one and you have a whole bunch of people show up at 10:15? That sounds like a bit of it's great, but it sounds like a bit of a problem now. So how do you solve for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's where the hiring binder comes in. The hiring binder is dedicated to kind of like almost be a little bit of a, not a distraction, but almost like a coloring book for those that are coming into the interviews. So they'll pick it up and they'll read through it. It'll tell them all about the job. It'll tell them about what they can expect. It gives them sample paychecks, pretty much breaks down the whole entire job. Sometimes we come out and there have been times where guys leave. They're like, oh, this job isn't for me. And we thank them. Like, I would prefer that you read through it and decide it's not a fit for you and then move on. Yeah. But the guys that do stay and they do read through the hiring book, whenever we have that interview, it's way more productive because we've already answered a lot of their questions. They know what to expect. They know what they need to be successful. They know what supplies they need. So it's a lot more productive interview once we get to that point.
So do you have, and this is done in person, which I find really interesting. A lot of people would probably opt to do this over Zoom. You guys have not. I'm sure you'll get into the reasons why, but is there can you just describe the building? Is there like a waiting room where a bunch of people can sit and go through the hiring binders and then a back office or a conference room where the actual interviews happen?
Yeah, so it's done in our office. And so you walk in, it's immediately the waiting room. And then we have a closed office that our hiring manager or my office manager will hold the interviews. So they come in, there's a QR code, they scan it, signs in, it lets us know they're here. And then they take a binder and take a seat.
Right.
And then once we're ready, our hiring manager will pull them in one by one. Now, we have worked with a few home service businesses that they actually have done it at coffee shops where they set up a little sign on a table and then they'll have somebody come in and sign in, take a binder and have a seat right there. But they usually have like a little section of that coffee shop, dedicated for interviews.
So your hiring manager is a busy person on these days then. Like it's like a bit of a dance, right? You get your first person there. They come in, they're in there for 15 minutes or whatever. You send them out, you grab the next person, And, some of these applicants would they need to wait for, upwards of an hour sometimes?
It depends. I think too, it's important to know your numbers. So for us, like if it's a full-time job, like say it's a full-time job that we're offering, we know that only 50% of those guys that book an interview are going to show up. So even though I have 30 people that applied or scheduled an interview at a certain slot, which normally doesn't happen, I only expect 15 to show up as a full-time job. If it's part-time, it's like 33.1%. So if I have 30 people that have scheduled an interview, I expect 10 to show up, which again, I would say we average between 15 to 20 people that schedule an interview. And so based on those numbers, it kind of helps us understand, hey, if we're really slammed, I might pull in my office manager, to help us do that. But generally, my hiring manager, she crushes it. Like she's in and out, effective, and she's made some really, really good hires using this.
I love that you guys track your historical data closely enough to know like the conversion percentage of like an applicant to a show up and how that changes based on the role. Full-time, it's 51% or 50%. Part-time, it's 33%. And then that allows you to make pretty reliable forecasts on, what this next Tuesday hiring block is going to look like based on how many applicants you have. So I think that's a really, really strong approach to doing it. I'm curious about the interview itself. So, let's say Tim shows up in the waiting room. He's gone through the hiring booklet. He's learned a little bit about you guys. He walks back into the room. Like, what is your hiring manager asking about? And what is he trying to ascertain about this applicant? And then maybe a follow-up question is like, how effectively can he do that in such a short window? I think that's a really important question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically our interviews are going to last between 10 and 15 minutes. So they're not super long. And the approach that we've taken is in the past, we would be super selective and we would really dig deep and we would want a certain person. And sometimes we strike out. And then if we struck out, we'd have to restart the whole entire process over, which took a lot of time. And so what we do now is we have about 10 to 15 minute interview where if they've already had the hiring binder, that whole interview is really based around them because they already know what we expect. Now we'll answer a couple of questions, but generally that 10 to 15 minutes is just about them. Hey, what have you been up to? Where are you working? What's important to you? And then at that point, if we feel like they're a good fit, if my hiring manager feels like they're a good fit, there's no trick questions in the interview. It's very straightforward. And so if we feel like they're a good fit when they move forward, we prefer to put the friction on the back end. So instead of trying to nail down like one, unicorn candidate or one perfect candidate that's going to be here for the next 3 to 4 years, we prefer to make a almost like a conditional job offer to multiple candidates. And then if they follow through with the onboarding, we put more friction there. And the guys that finish our onboarding is the guys that we expect to be high producers for a long time.
I mean, is it fair to say that these short interviews are kind of more of a vibe check? You're like, hey, like I like this guy. Like they showed up on time. They seem legit. I'm not going to pretend in 10 or 15 minutes I've like gotten into their life story and I have this super, this 4K high definition picture of who this person is and how they act and how they're going to be in certain situations. You rely, and we're going to get to this in a second, you rely on sort of the back half of this system to filter out the people who are not great. And then this in-person thing is more of like a vibe check is kind of the word I want to use. Is that safe to say?
I would say that's a part of it. Because if they've made it to the interview, they've already shown that they have some level of competence for this role. Yeah. So they're already shown that they are fit for this role. At that point, if they show up and they show that dedication, that's whenever we're like, okay, vibe check. Are we able to see if this guy would actually fit within our team?
Yeah, and like, and like, I think I want to mention too, like, and it's not like, we need to look at like the role that we're trying to fill as it truly is. Are we hiring a C-suite level person? No. Are we hiring a financial controller? No. Like these are cleaning roles. I think most of them are contract. It's very part-time. It's very fast-paced. It is high turnover. That's the nature of the thing. And so while the quote unquote hiring best practices out there in many books are going to talk about behavioral interviews and multi-step and getting to know preferences and abilities and personality profiles, all this stuff, which by the way, I'm here for. You've augmented your process to make it make sense for the type of position that you have, which is a little bit more, I don't want to say burn and turn, but it is like faster paced. These aren't necessarily like super, super long-term employees in most instances. And so this works for that, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would not do this if I was hiring an office manager or a higher level, position, but for an entry level or a technician role, I mean, this works very, very well where you're able to, again, get enough people that are going to be qualified and then really filter out multiple to find the actual best 2, 3, or 4 that you want to bring on the team on the back end.
Yeah.
So we rely less on your traditional behavioral interview and more on, okay, hey, you've told me things that are great. That's awesome. I love it. You passed the eye test, but we also want to see what you do. Are you following through with onboarding? Are you showing up to orientation? Are you completing your online courses? Are you doing those things that are required to join the team?
So let's move to this, like the back half of this system then, and tell me what happens after this 15-minute interview.
Yeah, so 15-minute interview. I mean, if we have a certain number, like a target number that we're trying to hire for, we will offer the top, 15 or top 10 or however many people that we're trying to hire at that time. We will send them an intake form. So we just basically log in, send them an intake form, and then they have 5 days to fill that out. So again, this is really where it starts. We're starting to put some friction here to filter out those guys that are not serious. So 5 days, they have to complete that intake form. Now, once they complete that intake form, they automatically get uploaded into our learning management system. Now, that learning management system, you can think of it as similar to Trainual or something, like that. But we have uploaded all of our processes into that system. And so it talks about the tech that we use, how to use it, how to see your schedule. And then we talk about our actual process. And that's going to be our core service offering for us, which is like a guest departure clean, which is just the cleans in between guests. So once they fill out the intake form, they have 5 days to do it. If they don't fill out that intake form, we're going to kick them to a different list where we can activate them in the future if needed.
Do you send them kind of like a breakup email? You send them like, hey, looks like this isn't something you're interested in. Like, we're closing the file. I'm sure there's maybe a few reminders in a drip email, and then at the 5 day mark, you kind of close the door on them, so to speak. Do they get notified of that?
Oh, yeah. So we drip all that out. So we let them know, hey, tomorrow's going to be the last day. If it's not done by tomorrow, we're going to move forward. So we do let them know and create a sense of urgency. Okay. So that way they're not like left hanging. And not only that, they probably interview 2 or 3 other places.
For sure.
So we want to make sure that we're communicating and being in front of them.
Yeah. Okay. So, the ones that don't complete it by 5 days, they get exited. The ones that do get pushed to an LMS. You mentioned, can you go a little bit deeper on like what is in this LMS? What are the videos of? What's important in there? What are you trying, and what kind of action are you pushing this applicant to take inside of it?
Yeah. So this again is about your earlier question, how much friction is the right amount of friction? So our goal of the LMS is to provide enough friction that number one, they're productive and they understand what they're doing, but not of every single core or service offering that we have or every single nut and bolt that we have in our business. So really it's going to be the quick things they need to know with the tech. Hey, here's how we communicate. Here's how you see your schedule. Here's how you see your directions. So those are some core things that they need to know. And then our actual service offering, what we did is we took some of our top techs and we had them go with the camera and record themselves doing our guest departure clean, which is our service that we do most. And then we uploaded all of that broken into different sections into our learning management system. So altogether, it takes about an hour maybe to finish this online course. And then by the time they're done with it, they know how to log in. They know how to communicate to us. They know where to see their pay. They know how to actually complete our clean. And they're starting to become productive. And we haven't had to touch them yet as far as manually.
How do you ensure that the knowledge got absorbed? Are you watching their watch time on the videos on the back end? Do they do a test? Like what's the process there?
Yeah, it's just quizzes. So we set a certain threshold where it's like, hey, you have to pass this at an 80% mark to move on to the next section. And so they have to pass a quiz, and it's not going to, again, we're not trying to trick anybody, but we want to make sure that they actually retained what they've read. And so they do have to complete that quiz before moving on to the next section.
I didn't ask you this to prep this, so if I put you on the spot here, no worries, but I'm curious if you even have just a guess at what percentage of people who pass the interview and are sent sent the intake. Sorry, no. Pass the interview, do the intake form. What percentage of people from there finish the videos and complete the quiz? Do you lose roughly half? Do you keep most of them? It seems like a really important stage. I'm wondering how efficient it is.
Yeah. So 62%, 62% of people that complete that intake form will end up completing the learning management system, the course that we have there. The other, 38, they'll typically fall off, and we'll put them again in a different list. We're going to reactivate them.
I mean, you know what's so amazing? It probably seems obvious, but what's so amazing about this is like, up until this point, we're now talking about applicants who are at a stage in the funnel, who've done an interview, they've read a hiring booklet, they've filled out an intake form, they've watched content on you guys. This is like, outside of that interview, which again was done in blocks, this is like completely automated. So you're looking at people at this stage who are, I think it's safe to say, like pretty serious about this, pretty interested. You filtered out all of the tire kickers for basically no time off of your calendar. Like that's just like such an incredible. Do you remember kind of like in the early days of like figuring this out and working out the kinks, like a real like eureka moment when you had like pretty good people near the bottom of a funnel? Like, holy crap, I can't believe I used to do it the other way.
100%. I would never forget. So for us, it was kind of goes back to that initial story where I was like, hey, we called all these guys. 7 said they're going to be here tomorrow, and only 1 showed up. Well, whenever we started only having like a 10% call out rate for the days that we were actually cleaning and having work done, that's when it kind of clicked. I was like, well, 10% we can live with. We can plan for 10%, but like 85% or whatever that high number may be, you really can't do much with it.
So somebody completes the quiz. They get a passing grade on the quiz. What next?
Yeah. So once they get to that point, so in that quiz too, I guess it's important to mention there's a lot of videos of our team doing things. And so by the time that they move to the next step, they feel like they know us because they've seen us in videos. They've seen me welcome them to the team. And so they feel like they know us, even though we haven't had a ton of time manually working with them. They do feel like they know us. And so from that point, what will happen is they complete the course. And as soon as they complete the entire course, they automatically get invited to a Zoom orientation. So now that again, that's going to be a group setting. We do it once a week and usually about a 2.5 hour block. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be up to, 40 people. It's really as many people that can complete it. We'll schedule.
What's the point? What's the agenda? Like what kind of happens in that Zoom orientation?
Yeah, so this is where we really start having more of a hands-on approach. And by this point, these 62% from the job offer that have completed it, we're starting to feel pretty good about. And if we can move them forward past this Zoom orientation and get them into the next stage, that we're going to have a really good success rate for them to be able to onboard successfully. So the agenda is going to be pretty much everything in the learning management system. So everything we talked about, now we're just doing together. Hey, did you get logged into your apps? Oh yeah, did you see how you can check in? Do you see how you can do your directions? And we just go through everything that they already learned. But now we're here to answer questions. We're here to support you. We're here to fill any gaps that you may not have. And that typically can take between 2.5 hours.
At the end, what's kind of the closeout of the orientation? Are they like sent to a job site the next day? Are they like officially hired if they complete that?
So once they get done there, then we're top of the funnel. We're kind of hands off. We're whittling them down. The lower down the funnel that we get, the more hands on we start to be, the more time we start dedicating to them. So once they finish the Zoom orientation, we'll break them into a smaller group. Typically, it'll be 3 of our cleaning pros, which is our technicians. 3 of our cleaning pros will be assigned a team leader. And so they will all meet at our office, which is a commercial laundry facility. They'll meet here at our office and they will just go through an entire day together. They'll usually have 2 cleans, and then their first clean, my team leader is like, going to go through the entire process herself, explaining what she's doing. And again, all we're doing is hammering home what you've already learned in the online course, what you've already learned in Zoom orientation, but now you're doing it in person. So the team leader will lead the first clean. The second clean, the team or the guys that are onboarding that are with the team leader, they will complete the second clean, and the team leader will give them feedback based on that. And that's kind of their final stage before they end up getting it into their solo cleans.
What's interesting is at every stage of this, you really do like leave the ball in their court. So like part of this process is about getting the right people and is about like educating them on systems and processes and how you guys do your cleaning and how you schedule and all that. But really what you're trying to do, and I think you've done this in a very clever way, is you're trying to like test through automations and quizzes and pre-built content. You're trying to test their kind of desire or give a shit level about the job, where it's like, because there's like 4 or 5 off ramps available to these people should they not want to continue. And I think you've done that by design, so that if they're not serious, they can just select a button or not select the button or forget to do the intake form in 5 days or whatever. And then you are, very effectively in a very hands-off way, just basically auto exiting the people that aren't serious. I just think that's like a nice thing that you've baked into this. You give them opportunities to not proceed. And the result you're left with at the end is I think for the most part, people who truly do want to proceed. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but for a role like this, again, not C-suite level, probably one of the most important things is like, do you want to do this?
Yeah. 100%. No, I think you summarized it well. And not only that, but if they do go through it, day one is usually pretty productive.
Right.
Like we've already talked about it in 3 different formats.
Yeah.
Online course, Zoom orientation, in person. So by the time you actually, you hit the ground producing. So day one, I know I'm pretty confident you're going to show up to the job site. And number 2, I'm pretty confident you're going to do a decent job from the very beginning. And that's the next hardest part is, great, okay, so once these guys are onboarded and they're starting to clean, like how do you keep them wanting to do a good job? And that's really where the next stage of that is where we start having our performance pay. And
Talk
so
about
we
that.
don't.
Yeah, this is really cool.
Yeah, so our performance pay, so we're not going to, we don't, in the past, we made a mistake where we would pay everybody the same. You'd clean a unit, you get paid the same. It doesn't matter if you got, did a terrible job or you went above and beyond, you got paid the same. And what we found is all of our A players were leaving because they were getting upset, which is understandable. And so now what we've done is we rank our cleaning pros in 3 different levels: general cleaners, level 1 cleaning pros, and level 2 cleaning pros. General, it doesn't matter if you've been cleaning for 100 years or if you're brand new, everyone in our company is going to start as a general cleaning pro. Now, level 1s, you're going to have a base pay plus you're going to end up getting a small bonus, and then on top of every clean. And then level 2, same thing with a higher bonus. The 3 things that we're tracking, we track 3 things to level up. Are you on time? So punctuality, we expect you to be there at least 90% of the time. You need to be on time. Because again, we're having 6-hour windows. We have 6-hour windows to turn all these properties. So if you're not on time and we scheduled you thinking that you were going to be on time, and now you're late to the unit, now you're late finishing, and guests are having to wait outside the unit to, come into the property. So we track that. The second thing is going to be quality. What's our actual quality score? And then the last thing is time goals. How long does it actually take you to clean the property? Because based on the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, etc., we know it should take you this long to clean that property. How close are you to actually meeting that time? And that determines if you're a general level 1 or level 2.
How do you guys track the quality of the clean? Is that, I'm getting kind of technical here, but is that just based on like, hey, if you get a negative review, you get docked? Or is there someone actually doing quality control at the site?
Great question. So we have 3 ways that we track it, the quality. Number 1 is going to be internal. So we always internally, we're going to inspect that property to make sure it's up to our standard. And so we're going to come in with an inspector or a team leader. We'll also do some inspections, and they have a checklist. It's a part of what we call our 7-step process. Our guest departure clean that I mentioned, we have what's called a 7-step process on how to have a perfect departure clean. So everything that they inspect is going to be based off of that SOP. Did you do step 1, step 2, step 3, etc.? You get scored on that internally. The next is going to be some of our clients, they're property managers. So they're kind of the middle between us and the guests. They may come in behind our team to check and make sure if they manage that property, that it's ready for the next guest. And so if they dock us or say they have a complaint, that's going to go towards your score. And then the last thing is going to be a guest. That's like the ultimate taboo. If a guest comes in and complains, that's a big deal. And so we're going to track that and weigh that a little bit more than just an internal or a property manager cleaning. And so we base it off that.
Do people, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the people you work with on this sort of gamification of the whole system? Did they like it?
So when we first started this, it was a couple of years ago, and we got major pushback. Like, no, everyone thought it was a terrible idea. But what I found out a couple months later, those guys that thought it was a terrible idea were usually our low producers.
Right.
And so now these guys love it. Like, if you go on our Indeed page, we have 56 reviews on Indeed, and there's so many of them that are like, pays great, pays great, pays great, because now they have control of their pay. And we tell them that. We're like, hey, as you rank up, not only are you going to earn more, but you also get prioritized on the schedule. So all of our level 2s, we put on the schedule on the biggest properties more frequently over our level 1s, and our level 1s over our generals. And so they love that because it kind of puts it in there, again, putting the ball back in their court to be able to be successful in this role.
It's amazing. I'm really curious here, what sort of, I don't need you to take me through like the entire tech stack and how it's set up and every single zap that's been done, but at a high level, what sort of tech and automations and systems does a business owner need to have in the background for this whole concept to even be viable?
Yeah. So the way we started doing this is a whole lot different than how we do it now. And so when we started, it was around COVID, and we were at that peak point where too much work, not enough work. You constantly balance that. I can't handle this. And then COVID hit, and we had 6 weeks to figure it out before everything opened back up because they shut down the Airbnbs. We ended up using Zapier along with, a bunch of our CRMs and text messages, just a ton of stuff mixed together. And it was tough because that's just a lot of things to put together. So we've been working on a dashboard now that we basically pull all this into one place, but it's going to be a text message box. So you have an inbox where you can email, text, Facebook Messenger, all that. And then it's kind of like Zapier where you're able to automate a lot of stuff. Your forms are all in one place. Your calendar is all in one place. So it really pulls a lot of tools into one because it's going to be, Calendly, similar to Calendly, some kind of text messaging system or email system. You're going to want to have a hiring page. You're going to want to have somewhere to track them. Maybe you're using ClickUp or Asana to track, hiring stages. We've tried to pull all that into one place because, it does take a lot to kind of get that rolling.
One place being like a spreadsheet or something else, or something that someone built for you guys custom?
Yeah. So we had somebody build something for us custom. Yeah, so it's all in one place, and that's where we have our dashboard. Like when people apply, we have a rolling number that every time people apply, it like adds that number. We can see our no-shows. We can see how many people are currently onboarding from a high level. All of that in one snapshot on this system that they built for us.
What has this? Actually, let me switch this up. I first want to know maybe some of the drawbacks. Are there things about this approach to hiring, which again isn't going to be for everyone, but having done this for a few years, are there a few kind of like drawbacks or limitations to this approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that when people first hear about this, they're like, hey, that's almost too hands off. And, they may feel like that's not quite as personable. And I felt the exact same way in the beginning where I'm like, hey, I want to have conversations with these guys. I want them to know who I am. I want them comfortable. So the drawback at first is it did require some effort to be able to, make sure that they have that trust with us, that they know when they walk in the door, like we're a legitimate company, you're going to get paid, you're going to have work. That was one of the big things that we wanted to instill, that we were a little bit nervous about an automated system not being able to do for us.
Mm-hmm. And that personal touch, have you found that to really be a problem, or have you sort of made it up in other parts of the system?
We've made it up primarily.
Yeah. And
so what we do is, we have Indeed reviews, right? So we have a lot of Indeed reviews, and we try to put that in front of everywhere. We want to put that in front of the applicant on the hiring page. We're going to text that to them before they arrive to their initial job interview so they can read about what it's like to work with us. And then we're going to ask them to leave us reviews. We have videos from the team welcoming them to the team. So all of that's kind of baked into the process. So that way, though, even as automated, they feel like they're getting that human touch and they feel like part of the team from the very beginning.
What has this implementation item, and I know it's taken a little while to sort of build out fully, but now that it's done, can you talk about what this has made available in terms of growth, in terms of team building, in terms of even the way you think strategically? What has this made available for your business, Logan?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the past, we have always struggled with, we need more clients, now we need more people. Now they have people, we need more clients. It's that constant yo-yo. And now it's just, we need more clients and other operational things. So now I'm not really worried about the people. I'm more worried about the laundry. I'm like, well, how do we keep up with the laundry that we're doing? Because we're doing, 12,000 pounds a week on average. And then now we get to turn our attention to other problems that help us, really grow if we can kind of solve that.
It's so cool, man. I honestly, man, I love what you have built here. I think this is so ingenious, and it's not going to work for every role and every single type of industry, but for those that do, right? If you have a lot of high turnover positions, if your business is inherently very seasonal, where there's big swings up and down in terms of revenue and production, or if honestly you're just listening to this and you kind of like this approach to doing it, I really, really want to ask you listeners to dig deeper into this. Actually, that's probably a good question to close, Logan. If people wanted to reach out to you or connect with you and pick your brain on this, or just shoot you an email, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can email me at logan@mytalentcompass.com. You can connect with me on Facebook or any of the social platforms directly at my name, Logan Campbell. And, we've helped a couple of home service business owners that are very seasonal do this. And you can find more information about that at www.mytalentcompass.com.
Logan, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you doing this very thorough, in-depth system walkthrough. We'll have to have you back soon. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Contractor Evolution. If you've already subscribed to our channel, consider sharing this episode with another contractor who you think needs to hear it.